thank you so much for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you also for staying with us. Well, as many of us know, India is no longer just an emerging market. It has become a global economic powerhouse. Not only is it the world's largest major economy that's very quickly expanding, and it's set to become the world's third largest economy, it's set to become the world's largest economy in just a few years' time. It is also a payments leader. I think around 208 billion transactions were made last year. Now that's important because it's more than the US and China combined. Now there's someone who's been at the heart of this incredible transformation. He's witnessed it firsthand as the co-founder of Snapdeal. He has built one of the most successful e-commerce platforms in India. As an investor, he's also backed more than 300 startups, and he's someone who has witnessed firsthand the highs and the lows and the real opportunities of operating in India's market. Delighted to welcome our incredible guest this morning, Kunal Bahl. Thank you so much for joining us, Kunal.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks.
So I think India is so exciting. I was going through some of the facts just a moment ago. We know that India's digital economy is set to reach $1 trillion by 2030. 970 million users there, internet users, are online today, and 90% of the country's population has access to 5G or better. So some big facts here, but let's be very honest. Are we seeing real structural reform, or is there still a lot of hype that entrepreneurs need to be cautious of today?
You know, India is always firstly, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being here at the World Government Summit. Such an illustrious group gathered here. You know, India is always a country that everyone says has a lot of potential, but hasn't lived up to it, unfortunately, in the past. And but a lot of people will tell you that this time is different. But the question to ask is, why is it different this time? Like, what is the fact that makes us believe that it is different this time? The reason it is different this time is if you go back in time, from AD 1 to AD 1700, India was a top 2 GDP in the world. For many centuries in a row, we were the largest GDP on the planet. It seems hard to comprehend now that a country which otherwise has gone through a lot of impoverishment over the last maybe 100 years, 200, 300 years, would have been the richest country in the world. But after 350 years, after 1700, India is now going to be the top 3 GDP in the world again in the next 3 years. So this time is factually different. Like, we've, both in absolute and relative, not been this large ever, this significant ever, and this fast-growing ever. So it is definitely different. We are also the most digitally connected nation on the planet. 50% of the world's real-time payment transactions are right now happening in India. Wow. So in anything that you look at in India, there is just incontrovertible, undeniable progress that has happened, and it has laid the foundations for continued enduring growth in the Indian economy.
And I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities because there's a real startup culture there as well. In fact, India has the world's third largest eco-startup system. But we, of course, know that many startups don't actually end up lasting beyond 5 years. Now, I mentioned earlier, you have invested in more than 300 startups in India. So you're someone who has seen the real success stories, but the failures as well. Tell me, why is it that some startups have been able to not only survive, but really thrive in India, and why have some others fallen by the wayside?
Yeah, I think some are startup-specific reasons, but broadly, I always say that India is a land of mouth-watering opportunities and eye-watering challenges. So there's always so much opportunity in India, but then anyone who runs a business in India will also tell you there are eye-watering challenges. But that's what founders do. That's what entrepreneurs do. They overcome those eye-watering challenges to capitalize on the mouth-watering opportunities.
Give me an example, though. What's a startup maybe that you've invested in, or what's a tangible example of someone who's really understood what India needs and what works and how to overcome
I think
the challenges?
one of the things that exists in India, which is a challenge, is that it is, in general, a low-trust society, right? So many times you have startups who've created a lot of value by bringing more trust in the transactions, bringing more trust in the dealings with the end consumer. An example would be a company that we funded when it started, actually has operations in the UAE also, called the Urban Company, right, which provides plumbers, electricians, and various types of handymen, but in a high trust manner. Because traditionally in India, if you needed a plumber, you could get one, but the guy will come late, he will likely not know what he's doing, and will overcharge you in the end, and will end with an ugly negotiation. But these guys said, look, these guys are better trained, there's a quality control around them, there's a rating system around them. If you don't like the service, we'll give you a refund, so on and so forth, and all the parts and equipment are sourced by them directly. So that creates a high trust experience. So the customer says, hey, even if it is a 10%, 20% premium, I will keep coming back to this service. So that would be an example of how startups are taking quintessentially Indian challenges and Indian friction, or friction in our market, and turning that into an opportunity.
And of course, raising capital has always been important as well. It's something that Indian startups have been good at doing. They've raised around the last decade, around $161 billion. But of course, we know that raising capital doesn't always equate into building a successful business. So I'd love to hear your insights. If you were meeting with an early stage founder today, what would your advice be? What's the one golden rule you have for raising capital the right way?
Yeah, I think the only way to raise capital is the fast way. Like, you should just raise it quickly and get on with building your business, because I think many times founders do a lot of micro optimization with valuation terms, etc. But I actually have a slightly different view from the prevailing wisdom of chasing unicorns. Like, I was listening into some of the earlier sessions around how many unicorns does X country have, Y country have. India has I think 140 now. But actually, every market has to decide what type of business it needs to build the bedrock, the foundation of that economy, of that startup economy. And I actually coined a term called an indicorn compared to a unicorn. A unicorn is basically $1 billion valuation, and an indicorn is basically a company that does ₹1 billion of revenue but profitable. Every economy at different points in time needs different kind of businesses. We need in India right now profit-making businesses that are building lasting, enduring enterprises, as compared to those who are only chasing valuation. Because valuation in private markets are, as we know, very volatile. It's essentially one person saying, okay, you have $1 million of revenue, but I will value you at $1 billion. It makes no sense. Versus saying, hey, you have real revenue, real profits, and you're on a path to eventually becoming a public company. That's how the US ecosystem was built in the 80s and 90s, the tech ecosystem. The bedrock was profit-making software companies that weren't huge, but were enduring. Eventually, they became the Oracles and the Ciscos. That's what we need right now in India, and those are the type of businesses we fund.
Okay, so let me talk a little bit about what we actually need in India, because by the time it's 2031, India's middle and upper households are actually going to be larger than the consumer base we see in the US. But I think a mistake that a lot of organizations do is that they think the Silicon Valley playbook is going to fit perfectly into India's market. And of course, India is really not a one-size-all-fit market. So how can companies really ensure that they are dealing with India's unique challenges and not just trying to take a leaf out of the global playbook that'll work somewhere else?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions global companies have when they enter India, but I think less so now, because so many people have burned their hands that the smart companies have gotten wiser. The biggest error I feel companies make is treating India as one homogeneous country, like one homogeneous consumer, which may be the case in the West, may be the case in the Middle East, where there is ubiquitous affluence. In India, that's not the case. Literally every 10 kilometers, the taste changes, the food people eat changes. Every 100 kilometers, the language changes. Right? Every 500 kilometers, the entire culture changes. And so you cannot have one service, one product that caters to such diverse needs. So the smartest companies typically pick a segment of the market. The beauty of India, with the 1.5 billion population we have, every segment is huge. But the problem is when you try and go after 1.5 billion people at the same time, that's usually a recipe for failure. So picking any segment, however small it is, and then just going deep in it and building lots of consumer love in it, and then winning the right and the trust of the consumer to expand slowly into other adjacencies.
And really understanding that very niche target market. Look, we're out of time. I want to ask you a quick question in just 30 seconds. Big opportunities today. We're seeing big infrastructure push. Of course, the budget was just released. Be e-commerce, digital boom as well, manufacturing as well. Where would you be putting your money today if you were starting a new business in India?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, like, what are the exciting sectors in India? I always say, what is not exciting? Everything is exciting.
But give me an example. Be specific.
Yeah, I feel that almost any technology-enabled business, but particularly the big gaping holes probably exist in areas like healthcare right now. We just don't have enough healthcare services or infrastructure or technology for 1.5 billion people.
Okay, so healthcare services, we all heard that. Kunal, what a pleasure to hear your insights today from such a successful founder who really has lived the highs and the lows. Thank you so much for joining us and wishing you a fantastic day here at the World Government Summit. Thank you very much.